lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll turn the time over to her at this time.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Let's start with roll call. Let's start over with Commissioner Steele and work our way across.
Brandon Mackey.
Kirk Wilkins.
Troy Cunningham.
Ken Kilgore.
Okay, and we have a quorum. Given that this is a public meeting, we have set aside some time for you to come forward if you'd like, to state your name and address for the record, and share your thoughts and any concerns that you might have on any agenda items that are not on the agenda. Ask you to come forward at this time. All right. Given that there aren't any, we'll close public input at this time, and we'll move on to item number 4. This is a public hearing for the Marina Pump Station site plan and conditional use permit located at 156 East Harbor Parkway, and we'll turn the time over to Sarah Carroll. Where is Sarah Carroll? Okay.
And the TVs, can you hit the TVs really quick? Thank you. They are warming up. All right. So, I apologize for the confusion. Sarah is out sick. And the official applicant is actually our city engineer, so Kara just went to get him so that we have the applicant here tonight.
He is not here. He was called out on an emergency
Okay.
by Mark Christensen.
All right, well, we'll see if I can answer questions on his behalf as well. Okay, so this is a site plan and a conditional use permit located down at the marina in Harbor Bay. So it is both a site plan and a conditional use permit. As the Planning Commission, you are making recommendations on both of these to the City Council. The City Council meeting has been scheduled for October 4th, and at that meeting, the Council will be the Land Use Authority making the final decision on that. So with that, here you can see the location. For everyone's information, north is at the top of the map here. Redwood Road going all the way down here to the south of the city, so we are looking at the marina. Here you can see the marina park itself. As you know, it is a part of a long-range master plan, eventually containing quite a few more recreational amenities. At this point in time, primarily containing a parking area and then access to the marina itself and access to the lake. So here you can see this is the proposed marina pump station. Again, north is at the top of the map here, and we have some close-up plans for you here. There are some existing improvements, including a sewer lift station and a restroom at the site, so this will fall in line with those other improvements. So same orientation. This is the arm of the marina, the nearest arm, and then this is the proposed pump station building. Access to the building behind for vehicles. Additionally, you'll see a couple different versions of plans in your packet. As the Urban Design Committee or the Development Review Committee did the urban design on this, there were a few additional recommendations made. One of the concerns was that the building could potentially block access down to there are quite a few paddle boards and other users that access the lake at this location, and so a recommendation was made to put a trail down around so that visitors to the marina could see that there was still an access point to the lake. Also, there were some discussions on the landscaping requirements. Landscaping proposed, you'll see there were 2 plans in your packet as well, showing some planter beds to help break up this building here, as well as the potential addition of some landscaping along the trail. So here we're slightly different orientation now, just looking straight up onto the building. The marina arm that we were just looking at is over here. And so here you can see the addition of the trail. And then on the next page, this is the landscaping plan showing the planter beds around the building. These trees here are kind of up for discussion. Staff has some concerns that those trees may actually block some views of the lake, and so staff is currently working with the applicant on some alternatives to actually planting trees in that location. But you can see the approximate location of that trail. So with that, this, as mentioned, it's a conditional use permit and site plan. There is a public hearing, and after which you'll be making a recommendation to the council. You have elevations in there. The photo in your packet shows approximately what the building will look like in terms of color and material palette. And the options in your report are to forward a positive recommendation to the council with conditions, with any additional conditions or changes that the Planning Commission would like to make. And then also, as always, you have the option to continue it or forward a negative recommendation. Now, the staff recommendation is to forward a positive recommendation, and the applicant is here to answer any questions.
Okay.
And at this time, this is a public hearing and no public comment has been received. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. Would the applicant like to add anything to the presentation?
Sure. Technically, Gordon's the applicant, but he's up at the UDOT Harvest Hills open house and will be joining us shortly, so I'll step in. The project it's a pretty straightforward pump house, including it down at the marina. It's a very technical project for what we're trying to do. I won't bother you with the conversations on transferring of water rights, and it's a vital piece of infrastructure for the south end of the city. As you may or may not know, the Fox Hollow well stopped working earlier this year, which caused for some of the issues in the south end of the city. We also test dug a well that, if you look at Reed and Ursula Wayman Park, which is kind of on the western edge of the photo, we test dug that well last year. It was a gusher. It was a great well. The only problem is the water came out at about 110 degrees and was too heavy in minerals for us to be able to use viably for a water source. And so that had us change our focus. This project was always in our master plans, but it was many years down the road. We've had to fast track this project because, in essence, we've lost two water sources which should have been online in the south end of the city. The well at the Reed and Ursula Park was last year's project. We would have hoped to have about 3,000 gallons a minute coming in from that particular project. When that did not pan out for us, we moved to this plan, which was many years into the future, but will be progressing hopefully this winter. The project is going to be, it's actually out to bid right now. Obviously architecture and other things can change, but as far as location and elevation goes, it's out to bid for about the next 3 weeks. Landscaping, because there will be dredging as part of this project, the landscaping and things in that nature, there's going to be some cleanup, restoration, landscaping, obviously, that's going to be getting done. But the next phase of the project will be also to take and build another jetty to the north. And so the beach area, as well as the area north of kind of the driveway down to the building, are areas that we're not really trying to touch right now because they will be heavily impacted by the next phases of the park development. We do have a jetty and a grant to begin creating a jetty down there, and so that's kind of running parallel with this as a different application. But you're going to see in the coming years a whole lot of modifications, a swim beach, and all kinds of new amenities that we're going to be adding for this particular marina to bring us forward with our master plan on that. Be happy to answer any other questions or answer any questions that might come from the public.
Okay, great. This is an open hearing, a public hearing, so we will open up public comment this time for item number 4, which is the Marina Pump Station site. If you have any comments about that, we invite you to come forward, state your name and address for the record, and take about 3 minutes and share your thoughts. Anyone? Okay, given that there isn't any public comment, we'll close the public hearing at this moment, and we'll open this up to the Planning Commission. Do we have any comments from the Planning Commission?
I just have a question.
Okay.
I drove by out down to the south, and the lake is so low. How far out are you going to have to
So looking at this plan, if you can imagine kind of a V from the mouth of the jetty, it's actually going to be going out kind of in a V pattern, quite a ways out into the lake. That's actually one of, once you get outside the jetty, there's still quite a bit of depth. The marina happens to be really the low point right now. The marina, if we could pick a year to dredge the marina, this was it. As bad as everything else is, that's actually the silver lining. We've got only a few inches of water in most of the marina. If you notice the northern jetty, we're going to be building our intake infrastructure right at the corner, the interior corner of the marina at that location. So there'll be quite a bit of dredging. In fact, the undeveloped park that you see at the north side of the trees and things there, that area will be made into a temporary drying pond, if you would, and the dredging material will be held in that drying pond. It'll take 30 to 90 days, depending on the weather this winter, to dry that material, and then part of the project will be to haul that off and then to restore all of that landscaping. Again, we have another jetty project which will be following along next spring, so we'll probably continue to use that until we finish that jetty to the north, and that may be even 2 build seasons. But then once we've got that done, then we'll be finalizing the rest of this park and formalizing it into its finished state. So it's going to be a big dredging project, and we're going to dredge this big V out into the lake. And interestingly enough, some people will scratch their head and say, well, why are you tapping into the lake if you've got algae blooms and other things? The algae bloom is kind of a function of the really low water, a lot of the climatic conditions that have come into it. Interestingly enough, had we been pumping, the speculation from the engineers is that enough water would have been circulating through the marina that it wouldn't have developed the algae, because there would be a continual flow of water rather than the water sitting stagnant in the marina. So we're dredging. It's going to be a lot deeper. It will have some benefits, but it's a pretty good sized project with a lot of complexities associated with it.
So you feel like that it will be pretty well drought proof as much as you can?
As much as we can. So for example, the media reported this. It didn't end up happening, but there was conversations about even the canal water from the various canals being shut off this year. When the algae bloom hit, there was about a 24-hour period in which we were not taking water from our canals, from our canal source, which does make up some of our secondary irrigation system. That source, we were able to determine that 100% of the water that we were receiving was not coming out of Utah Lake, that it was coming out of the Deer Creek Reservoir and the Provo River watershed, so it was safe to use. So we were able to then kick those water sources back on. So it's kind of a unique thing. There are a lot of complexities associated with it, but when the lake gets shut off because it's too far below compromise, and that's really kind of the state thing, we're going to lose all of our canal water anyway. So at that point, us and a whole lot of cities on the west side of the Salt Lake Valley are all going to be having this conversation. But to your point, and this is the historical precedence, that the few times that this has happened since, I believe, the 1950s, all of the water users have gotten together, and in an act of cooperation, they have kept water going for all of the users, but they've taken haircuts, and there's been a collaborative effort among all water users, both in Utah and as well as Salt Lake County. There's always that fear. However, history has proven in the times that it has happened that everyone's going to come together and work together to try and keep water flowing as best as possible. So we do understand this is a weakness. However, we really don't have any other options in the south end of the city. We've kind of played those options out, and so this is the best option that we have at this point.
Commissioner Funk? He had something. I'll go to you.
First of all, I wanted to say that I like your plans as far as making it so that you can get in to repair it if you need to. That you're doing good on that. I think that was really good. I had a little question on the intake screen. Can you describe that any better? Or?
Yes, out in the marina itself. Is that technically out of their jurisdiction because it's in Utah Lake sovereign land? I'm kidding. Although it was an interesting concept. Yeah, so the intake screen, it's actually a very large structure. We're going to be putting a dock above it. Obviously, kids will see this kind of thing in the water, and we don't want them to get excited and start throwing giant boulders off the jetty down onto it to see what's going to happen. So we're actually going to put a floating dock that covers the top of the intake, and people think that there's going to be a sucking from the lake. And in reality, what this is imagine a colander, a giant colander that's built in the shape of a drum. The water will naturally just kind of flow into it, and then the water will actually go down and fill a reservoir just as a natural flow, but then the water will be sucked from the reservoir. There will be no sucking pull on that particular screen as it's been explained to me. I'm not the engineer. So it will just be basically a large colander. About I think it's maybe once a half hour or once an hour, there'll be a back push of air that will blow out any debris that's being caught in that screen. And so it'll bubble, every so often to kind of make sure that the screens are cleared. The reason that we're putting the dock above it is so that we can go out there, do maintenance. There is a small pump it's a garbage pump that's there. Interestingly enough, one of the things that's probably most humorous about this is we take the water out of the lake, we put it into our pump house, and we filter it. Any water that gets taken out of that filter has to be treated via the sewer system, rather than being able to discharge directly back to the lake. Even though it just came out of the lake, it can't run back into it. So it's one of those ironies of it, but the filtering system will be underneath a dock that's out in the jetty. We're going to have some sort of a structure. Obviously, if someone wanted to come fish off of it, they're welcome to, but for all intents and purposes, I think the better fishing's outside the jetty unless you're ice fishing. So.
And that's kind of what I was alluding to was, will you have any problem with fish getting into the?
No. Again, where it's not, the pumps and the motors will be pulling from the pond that will be underneath the pump house. Everything's just going to gravity feed into that, and there'll be a gap so that you're not going to get a sucking motion on the water itself. So the fish will swim in, bump into it, and then swim off just like they would if they bumped into any other stationary object.
And then my other concern and question was on the noise from the pumping station itself. Would you like to address that?
Yeah, like all pumping stations and all lift stations that we have throughout the city, they all make noise. Generally, our wells, they're as soundproofed as good as possible. We don't anticipate that we're going to have any problems. We have, I think, over a dozen well houses throughout the city right now, and even one that's smack dab in the middle of Jacob's Ranch, and that's our largest one that has a capacity of about 4,000 gallons a minute. And we design the structure so that it doesn't create a noise impact on the neighborhoods.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Kilgore, and then we'll go to Commissioner Cunningham.
Yeah, the noise question, that was also my question. Thank you for answering that. So the parking, it looks like we'll be losing 7 parking stalls, I think the plans, it said.
I don't believe.
It was on page 9. Wait, no, page 13.
I believe that was supposed to be a curb cut, but it would still allow it. Okay. Now, these parking stalls, typically the experience that we have down at the marina is that the parking for boats is the maximum capacity that we're allowed to, the allowed number of boats that we can have on the lake. All of these stalls would just be for the visitor section of the beach. Future phases for the park include additional parking, playground structures and additional amenities that will be coming. But again, where we're going to be using the northern portion as a drying field for the materials that come out of the dredging, now would not be an appropriate time to do that. But in future phases, we will be adding more parking into the area.
I was just wondering if by taking out 7 stalls, if it drops below the minimum that's required for this kind of amenity, and if that's the case, would that require like an exception or something?
If we were removing any boat stalls, then I would say that could cause a concern. We may have to readjust our permit, but where this is purely for the beach area and for the swim area, I can't imagine it having a negative impact. I will say this, we paddleboard quite a bit from down there, and you'll see a bunch of people lined up with their boats, not this year obviously because of the lake level, but in a typical year you'll have people lined up waiting to get their boats in. You know, someone with a boat and a trailer is going to have to pull out before they can pull in. And most of those spots, I've never had a problem parking almost immediately in that spot to walk down and drop our paddle boards and kayaks into the lake. Those are not, you know, those have never really been a problem in that area.
Okay. Thank you. Also, so when will the landscape and irrigation plan be finalized then?
So there are just a couple of changes that may occur, for example, for those trees and that are being finalized. So that will be finalized at the city council meeting.
Okay. Let's see, noise level. Oh, how long will the construction take? Will it go into the summer months and affect boating?
The dredging and things we anticipate getting done fairly quickly. Again, this is a really big project that we've jumped into to try and get wrapped up here pretty quickly. It will take probably into the early spring. The hope that we have is we are offering some incentives in the contract to try and get it open by the time the irrigation system begins. Now, that I think means that the building will be substantially complete, that the intake will be substantially complete, all the dredging will be complete, but there could be some site restoration, some landscaping, some other things that would go beyond that. Our goal, though, is to try and have the project up and running by the time we need to start putting irrigation water out to our residents next spring, which would be about April 15th.
Yeah, because I'm sure you know that, but with the shortened boating season because of what happens in the later half of the summer, at least for the last couple of years, the early part of the summer is when everybody wants to get out there, and plus it's spring fever and all that stuff. So it'd be too bad if we wouldn't be able to use, access the.
Yeah, and obviously this year with the basically the marina's maybe just a couple of inches deep, the whole marina. So we certainly have experienced that. We're hoping for a tremendous winter this year, and luckily Mother Nature's providing some early kickoff to that. Murphy's Law says because we have a project in the lake, we'll get a lot of water. So,
hopefully. Okay, thank you. That's all from.
Thank you, Commissioner Cunningham.
Commissioner Kilgore asked the question about parking that I had, and then Commissioner Font asked about how it would impact fish. So.
Okay. Any other comments? Because I have a couple. All right. So you talked about the filtering a little bit. Tell me about how the water, comes right out of the lake. Are you going to filter it for use with people's gardens? Are you going to take any kind of oil or gasoline that potentially could be there from boats? Is there any of that happening?
Well, the answer to the question is we will treat this water the same way we treat all of the other secondary water that we get from the canals, which is we run it through filter systems. Please understand, the canal water that we're currently getting, it's just pumped out of the other end of the lake.
It's
So
non-potable.
yeah, it's not a problem. It's not an issue.
I was saying non-potable.
It's absolutely not drinkable. But that's true of our canal water anyway. Again, if you can kind of imagine, if you would, the northern Utah lake, the water goes into the Jordan River. The Jordan River goes up to the Narrows here in Bluffdale. Then the water is pumped out of that river. It's the exact same water. It's pumped out of the river into the canals. It runs down the canals and is ultimately pulled into our irrigation system elsewhere. So from a water source standpoint, rather than taking the water 15 miles to the north, we're going to take it at the south end of the city and put it into our irrigation system at that side.
Okay. The second question is capacity. How much capacity can you get out of this pump house, and will it be able to supply the needs for the south end of the
Yes.
city, and for how long?
So we anticipate this as a very long-term structure. I think at build-out and when we maximize all of the pumps, when you build lift stations like this, you equip it with 1 or 2 pumps, and then you have room to add new capacity into the future. Obviously, The first phase for us, we're going to be pumping straight to our Zone 2. One of the projects that we also have coming forward in the near future is adding a secondary pond up above Lake Mountain. That's a project that's going to be in the design phase here, and probably another project that we'll be working on next spring or summer. So that project will be coming online. At its peak capacity, it'll do about 10,000 gallons per minute, and it is anticipated for many, many, many years and decades down the road for our service needs. But we'll start off probably with something closer to 2,000 to 4,000 gallons a minute, and then we'll add more pumps in future years to get it up to that ultimate capacity.
Okay, do we have any other comments from the Planning Commission? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to forward a positive recommendation for the Marina Pump Station site plan and conditional use permit located at 156 East Harbor Parkway with the findings and conditions in the staff report.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Is there a question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Let's move on to item number 5. Public hearing, Saratoga Springs 4, Church Major Site Plan Amendment located at 49 West Tanner Lane. Chad Spencer is the applicant. This is presented by Kara Knighton. Kara, I'll turn the time over to you.
All right, thank you. The applicant is requesting approval of a major site plan amendment to add 875 square feet of building space to a chapel located at 49 West Tanner Lane. So that's located kind of in the middle part of the city. Just for reference, north is up Redwood Road here, and it's just to the west of SSD. The proposed property was part of the City Center District Area Plan until a rezone and general plan amendment were approved by the City Council in July of 2015. A preliminary plat, site plan, and conditional use permit were approved by the City Council on January 5th of 2016. Final plat approval was granted in April of 2016, and the plat was recorded in May. The building permit for this, as you can see, they've kind of started construction, was issued on May 12th of 2016. So the expansion, so north is up with Redwood Road right here, and this is Tanner Lane coming through here. And the expansion is to the southern end of the building. They have added the square footage at this part right here. And then the landscaping is wrapping around. So they did lose a couple of parking spots, however, they are still meeting their minimums. As you can see here, this is their landscaping plan. Again, this is Redwood Road, and north is oriented up. So you can see how they're wrapping it around their building and how it's pulled out a little bit more. The original plan came about like that, but they're pulling this area out. These are the proposed elevations. This elevation has not changed, but you can see the back portion here. This is the area that you would see from the western part of Tanner Lane. This elevation has not changed, and this is the other side that would be facing Redwood Road. So you can see how they pulled that out there. Staff recommends the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing, take public input, discuss the application, and vote to approve the major site plan amendment so that the project may move forward. Alternatives include continuance or denial. With that said, this is a public hearing. No input has been received up to this time, and the applicant is here if you have any questions.
It looks like, oh, sorry. It says that fencing can comply. Where does the fencing need to go?
So the fencing actually does comply now. So what this was in reference to was the code amendment that the council actually approved on Tuesday. It was requiring semi-private fencing. It would have required it basically right along here. But the whole purpose of that was for residential and not necessarily for other types of uses.
Okay. So it does comply now?
Yes.
Great.
That's what
Is there a parking stall? What is the parking stall number requirement? I mean, how many parking stalls are required? I don't think I saw that.
Okay, so let me pull it up really quick. Sorry, it's gonna take me a minute to get through the staff report to find the numbers. So if I remember correct, so they're proposing 246 parking stalls, of which 7 are ADA, and it's actually on.
Was it in the report?
Zoom in. It's
I remember
right
the
down there in that
7
corner. If we can.
Okay.
Staff report to zoom in.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, sorry, we should have made it much more clear to, 246 is what they are proposing, the requirement is less than that.
okay.
So it's, the requirement is based on the number of seats, it's 1 per 3 seats, and so what we're trying to look for is the number of seats that they have. That determines the requirement, and we just can't remember offhand.
Okay.
But
Does
it's one parking space per every 3 seats
The
within.
expansion includes seats then, or is it more just a vestibule area?
It's not necessarily seats, no. So we just look at the seats in the main area.
Okay, so it may not change
It
the
does-
requirement
no.
at all. Okay.
Correct.
But either way, it's
252? 242 is the requirement? Thank you. You were able to
And
zoom in on that. Perfect.
they're 4 over.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Is that all? Commissioner Steele?
Well, I was just going to say, in all the time that I've served on this commission, this is the first project I've dreamed about.
First one that you've what?
Dreamed about. In specifically. Uh-huh. So, anyway,
So you're okay with it then?
I'm okay with it.
Okay,
I
good.
wasn't in my dream, but
That could have gone any way. I'm not sure where that was going to go, but any other comments that we have on this one? Okay, it seems like you're just adding in some more square footage, so I have no issue with this. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the Saratoga Springs 4 major site plan amendment as outlined in Exhibit 3 with the findings and conditions in Exhibit 3 and the findings and conditions in the staff report dated September the 13th, 2016.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Funk. Is there a question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Item number 5 passes unanimously. Let's move on to item number 6. Okay, public hearing. This is Hadco rezone from agriculture to industrial and master development agreement. Parcels 58-022-0121 and 58-022-0114 and 58-022-0115 west of Wildflower and north of SR 73. Okay, and we'll turn the time over to Kimber for that.
All right, excellent. So this project will look very familiar since we did have a public hearing scheduled for this at the last meeting. However, we're redoing it tonight because of noticing error. So for those members of the public that are here currently, just to get everyone oriented, again, here's the city, north is at the top. We're sitting right here off of SR 73 or Crossroads, and this is the location of the property. So clearly we need to amend this map here because the city boundary actually goes out around the Springs development and down around the Hadco property. So here you can see the city zone map. it is showing the Springs property to the north. The reference to Wildflower is this parcel here. We're going to be talking about that later on tonight. Harvest Hills, and we're talking about these 3 parcels right here. Now, back in the spring of 2015, when the Springs project was annexed into the city, additional property was also annexed to avoid creating an island or peninsula situation with the remnant parcels in the county. This is the boundary with Eagle Mountain right here. And so to avoid creating an island here, these parcels were also annexed here, the Hadco property, and then this triangular piece right here. Now, when the property here was annexed into the city, it was zoned agriculture. The applicants are requesting to rezone that to industrial to reflect the use of the property for extractive purposes, for mining. Now, they do have a mining operation on adjacent property within Eagle Mountain and existing rights to mine that property through the county. So with that, there are 2 proposals or 2 items before you tonight. One is a public hearing and possible recommendation to the City Council for the rezone from A to I, from agriculture to industrial, and also a related Master Development Agreement, or MDA. The Master Development Agreement, what it says is it pretty much codifies what they are allowed to do currently, which is continue their mining operation, but it does state that any future uses on the property will be subject to the city code. And under the industrial zone, there is a list of uses which was provided in the draft development agreement as well. And so they would be subject to county or to city requirements, have to obtain permits, for example, if they change the use of the property to something other than mining. If they wanted to put an office building there or do any other uses, they would go through the city process. At this time, their plan is to continue using the property for mining for extractive purposes, and that development agreement just codifies their rights to that use. Now, when they come forward for any approval, they'll be subject to city standards in place at the time, so long as it does not remove the ability for them to have those uses within the property or within the master development agreement. Now, you'll notice with a lot of rezones that you see, you also see a related general plan amendment. In this case, you don't see that because the property is already identified for industrial on the general plan. So this proposal is consistent with the general plan. As we discussed, the proposed use of mining and standards for future development. We did get some input based on the actions of Eagle Mountain this week, which was discussing the use of the property next door for mining. Eagle Mountain does have approvals in place. They have some processes. They are also looking into the impacts of mining, and so they are considering some future code amendments to address impacts from the mining. We've asked them to keep us up to date with what they find, and we may be bringing forward some related industrial zone code amendments for your consideration down the road, but those are not on the table tonight. So with that, your staff recommendation is to forward a positive recommendation to the City Council on the rezone with the findings and conditions in your staff report and any additional conditions that you would like to articulate. And then also forward a positive recommendation for the Master Development Agreement. Now you'll notice on the screen there's an additional condition, and this comes from discussion at the last Planning Commission meeting. And this is regarding the language in the MDA, which includes the list of allowed uses. Some of those uses were struck out in the Master Development Agreement, and the recommendation is to include all of the conditional and permitted uses in the industrial zone rather than striking some out. So with that, this is a public hearing, and we'll turn it back over to the Planning Commission for discussion.
I do have just a couple comments to add, Kimber. So this property, as she mentioned, is basically a non-conforming use. There has been mining on it in the past that was permitted under the Utah County ordinance. So basically when it was annexed, those non-conforming uses came with the property, and that was a permitted use on the property. Now typically you're thinking non-conforming uses, they can't expand that non-conforming use. But in Utah, according to the Utah Supreme Court, if there's been a non-conforming use on any part of that property, the non-conforming use expands and extends to the entire piece. So really this isn't granting them anything more than what they're currently allowed to do as far as mining is concerned. Now we do have to also keep in mind that they are permitted to mine but they are required to follow our ordinances as far as receiving permits and things like that. So if there is a permit that's required, they would have to go through us to get that permit. And of course, they would have to have the permits with the state of Utah as well, which they have represented us and shown us a copy of their permit with the state that allows mining. Now, like I said, it allows them to mine, and then also in the future to basically to those permitted and conditional uses in the industrial zone.
Thank you. Is the applicant here? Thank you. If you'd like to come, you can join us and tell us your name and address for the record, please. Is this mic on?
Gotcha.
Okay.
My name's Brad Cahoon with the law firm of Snell and Wilmer, downtown Salt Lake City, appearing for the applicant. I would just say that we concur with the staff report and also the statements that have been made by staff and legal counsel, and don't have anything to add, and just reserve the opportunity to answer any questions or comment on any public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Cahoon. Please join us if you will. You can sit at the table here, and if you have additional questions, we'll ask you. Given that this is a public hearing, we'll open the time now for item number 6. If you'd like to come forward, if you have any concerns or thoughts or ideas, please come forward and state your name and address for the record and limit your time to about 3 minutes. Anybody? Okay, given that there isn't any public comment, we'll close the open public hearing and we'll turn this over to the Planning Commission. Commissioner Kilgore.
I'd like to ask, what happens to the zoning legislation after approval of the MDA? So isn't there a zoning, not legislation,
This is a legislative
Legislative decision?
no, I meant to say litigation.
Oh.
Yeah, so, sorry, I got the words mixed up.
Really, yeah, so this is part of that settlement agreement. And really, this wasn't, as part of the settlement agreement, we have agreed to enter into this development agreement. Of course, it's still subject to the council's legislative discretion, so they could still say no. Of course, then the settlement agreement goes away. But yeah, as part of that settlement, we also get some other really, huge benefits to the city. Right now, that mining operation that probably has been at one of the issues, not the only issues, there's a lot of mining going on in Eagle Mountain, but there is an asphalt plant where there's significant mining going on, and it is by Hadco, who's also the applicant for this rezone. Well, we're the applicant, but Hadco's, that's the property that we're dealing with tonight. And they primarily use old military road that goes through Saratoga Springs, then turns into 800 West. As part of that settlement agreement, they're agreeing to provide an alternate route for that truck traffic. So instead of going through that area that's really close to Harvest Hills, they're going to provide an alternate route that goes almost directly south from this parcel that we're dealing with. These 3 parcels goes almost directly south and then ties into SR 73. So it's a bypass road that will really will benefit the city in the future, and frankly the other residential development that's nearby, the Wildflower development, the Springs development. Having this alternate route for the truck traffic will be beneficial for both of those projects.
Okay, so so the MDA and everything is would settle the litigation and the zoning litigation. Is that?
We have 2 separate lawsuits. We have a lawsuit over the use of the road, and then we have a lawsuit over the annexation.
Okay.
And it will resolve those 2 lawsuits.
If this doesn't, if the MDA doesn't get approved, then we're back into that.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd be back in those lawsuits and have to then proceed with discovery and go through that process.
Okay.
But this really provides a lot of benefits to the city, and it provides a benefit to the applicant, of course, because they have their rights recognized, their non-conforming rights recognized in this agreement.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm one thing. just wanted to confirm one thing. That additional condition that was added, I wasn't here last week. So you said that it restores the permitted uses for the industrial zone. Does that include the sexually oriented businesses? Because that was struck out on the.
Yes.
Okay. Then that's it for me.
And I mean, the applicant has absolutely no desire to do that. Their plan is to mine out the property, then put a storage facility for some construction vehicles.
I actually
in
have
the
no
future.
problem with it.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure why it was struck out in the first place, so. Okay.
I have some concerns over the impact that the mining is going to have long term. I guess do we know exactly how long they'll be able to mine this particular piece? How many years into the future? I've heard 10 to 15. Is that correct, or is that?
So it could be 10 to 15. It could be longer than that. The estimate for the planned removal of this hill here is 10 to 15, and this one is slightly larger. So it depends on what approach they take and what order they go about it. It could be 10 to 15 is a reasonable time frame, but it could be longer than that.
So are they going to do the piece in Eagle Mountain first and then start on this, or are
I'm
they
not
working
sure.
on both? We don't know.
Not sure.
I'm guessing in that time period the Springs development will be done and they'll be directly impacted by this. So I think we definitely need to add a condition. I'm not sure if it's not there or not, that we follow what Eagle Mountain's doing as far as hours of operation and direction, maybe even go as far as which direction the lights can be pointed when. I know that talking with my friends who live in Eagle Mountain, this is a kind of a source of irritation for the residents. And we will have people living fairly close to this when Springs development is finished. That could be a source of irritation for us as well.
Maybe to help answer that question. So right now, the development agreement gives them the permitted and conditional uses. All of their processes in the code they're required to follow. They'll still need to go through the permit process and receive those permits. We just can't say no, but we can address the code requirements as far as some of those things that you're discussing, the impacts of this.
Do we have those in place now or no?
We have certain standards. We have hours of operation, which are very similar to Eagle Mountain, now that I think about it. We also do have the dark sky requirement, which has the downward directed lighting and hours of operation for lighting, and so those are two of the larger concerns. And then we do have requirements for dust mitigation to some extent. I don't think we have exactly the same standards as Eagle Mountain, but we do have standards to make sure that they're mitigating impacts to properties that are off-site, so dust, noise, etc.
Would dust be something the city has to worry about, or is that something the Department of Air Quality has to?
Both to some extent, because we do have it mentioned in the conditional use permit process, but mostly Division of Air Quality.
Okay, and then my last concern, of course, is I guess they're supposed to be using 800 North and Old Military Road, but I have witnessed trucks coming up Aspen Hills Boulevard, which is way, way too small for any kind of a vehicle of that size. What I witnessed was a tractor with 2 trailers coming up Aspen Hills, and for me to get my Explorer up that street with cars parked on either side, it's pretty dodgy, and to get a truck like that up and down that street, it's not good. I have some concerns over the MDA. I think we're putting I don't really like having the huge list of possible uses in there. It'd be nice if we could narrow it down to something that they may be using in the future without having to, I don't think I'm not in favor of removing any of their property rights that they have to mining. Eden's not here to mentions that, so we need to protect their rights, but we also need to protect the rights that those people will be living there in the future.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Cunningham. Commissioner Funk.
I just have a little concern, more for them than us, more for them than the city. And that is that once the roads become city roads, what keeps the public from trespassing on their property, I guess is the way of putting it.
Sorry, which roads are you talking about? The access road?
All access roads, yes.
The one that they're going to use as the bypass road, correct?
Well, and it,
Yeah.
it talks about if they build roads and things, that they become city property. I'm just concerned that at some point, the city, some of the citizens could infringe upon their rights of trespass and privacy.
Yeah, so that's typically how we handle development. Obviously, if they have to provide access roads to the property, they build the roads to city standards, we accept them, they become public roads. In this case, they're not doing that, they're just building an access road. Would not be built to city standards, it's just gonna be road base, gravel type product. And we're not gonna accept this road or accept maintenance. So it's gonna be a private road. I suppose in the future, we could work something out with them that we take over ownership if they bring it up to city standards. I think that could be a beneficial thing to adjacent property owners in this area anyway.
Yeah, in the future it might be if,
Like the
if
Collins
anything else
brothers.
ever was built out there. But, I would just be concerned that, I don't know if they're going to have gates or how they're going to keep the public from trespassing on that property.
Well, and the applicant obviously is here and can help answer the question, but I believe what they're planning on doing is they have to get permission from, so you see that red property, that's zone RC, they're gonna have to get permission to go across that property and get easements for that. And so I would just imagine they're gonna work that out with the property owner to either provide gates and have that be part of their easement agreement with that property owner. But yes, they could gate that off because it's a private road.
Okay. That was because the way it was written, which is, like you said, normal for normal developments, is the city takes over the roads, which if it's a city road, then anybody has a right to travel on it. And I would think that they wouldn't want the public out in their mining area.
And the access, just keep in mind also the access road language is part of the settlement agreement, not part of this agreement. So if they have to provide a public road per our development standards, which for this mining operation they would not have to at this point because it's outside it, at this point they wouldn't have to because they'd have the private road that they'd be using for their access. But if they do have to, upgrade that to city road in the future, which we're not anticipating, unless it was voluntarily agreed to. But if they had to do that, then it would have to meet city standards, and we would take over ownership and maintenance of that road.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from the planning commission?
I just have a question on the access road. Where does that dump into SR 73?
Can you show us where it is on the map?
Where the access road will be?
Mm-hmm.
It approximately something like this.
And that will be the only access in and out of that property?
Actually, eventually there will also be another connection out to the Mountain View corridor.
What we would like it to do is to connect, or to have the connection at SR 73 across from where, I think it's called Spring Hill,
Right
Hill
across
Drive.
from this right here, to line up with this
It's actually
little access.
kind of to the left a little bit, I believe.
Oh, there is?
But we'd
There's
like
another
to,
one?
obviously we'd like to, it'd be nice to have a light there. And UDOT, of course, would have to approve that, but we'd have one of our city roads just directly across the street, so it'd be a four-way intersection.
With it being a access road that's not improved for traffic, highway traffic, is there any requirements or SWEP requirements for them to go from that road to a major road in regards to mud and debris that's going to come off of that access road?
Yeah, absolutely. So we would be the highway authority if they're accessing a city road for a state road, they obviously wouldn't be able to track debris onto that road. So the highway authority would have jurisdiction to regulate that.
Okay.
And I don't know how they handle it in other, they have similar private roads that are in the Eagle Mountain area. And I'm not sure what UDOT, I would
just
imagine UDOT
73
regulates that.
is a very high traffic road.
Yeah, so this would be on SR 73, which is a UDOT road.
Okay.
All right, any others?
Me.
Commissioner Steele.
Since this is already in our city, has there been any attempt to have them adhere to the hours of operation and light pollution and, or, you know, the dark sky ordinance? Or at what point will the city be asking them to comply with that?
Since they've come into the city, we have not had those incidents that we're aware of. Most of the activity takes place on the adjacent properties in Eagle Mountain.
Okay. We have the assurance that they're going to do this access road as part of the agreement or the settlement. What if, and what's the timeline on that? When will it begin?
They have, I believe it's, the agreement specifies 2 years. Is that correct, Brad? That's my recollection of it. 3 years.
Okay. What happens if they don't?
So right now, if they don't, if they're not able to get the easements, which we don't anticipate happening, we've had conversations with some of those property owners, and they're not opposed to it. If they can't do it, then they would just be able to go back to using Old Military Road and 800 West, which they have a right now currently to use.
Is there any way that we can say, yes, you can have industrial zoning, but we will hold that zoning up until you get that road in?
Well, that's part of the settlement agreement, so certainly the council could, the council could discuss, or they could, well, they've already approved that settlement agreement. So as far as the use of Old Military Road, 800 West, and this alternate access route, settlement agreement's already been signed and has already been agreed to.
Okay. But
this doesn't address the alternate access route, has nothing to do with this development agreement.
what I'm concerned is that we get 3 years down the road and somebody says, oh, gee, we haven't done that yet. We'll do it. And we've all seen that happen. And I'd like some kind of assurance to see that that actually happens, because it is causing some problems now, and we'll have those same problems for 3 years. But I would hope that we wouldn't have them 4, 5, or 6 years. And so I was trying to see if what we could do to tie that road in, and maybe we can't since the agreement's already been signed.
Yeah, you can, because the settlement agreement is completely separate from this agreement. This agreement doesn't address that access road. And so this is a separate, unrelated item to the settlement agreement.
Okay. I'd like to see us put some kind of,
Condition?
I'm not sure, I've seen conditions be ignored and no consequences. I think this is too important to just be a condition. Can we hold the zoning, just say, you know, yes, you can have it, but it won't be finalized until that road is in?
As I said, the road and the concerns over that's part of an agreement that's already been approved by the council. It's been approved through a resolution, as well as it's been signed. So there's nothing we can do to revisit the settlement agreement. This only pertains to the development agreement and assigning the zoning to the property.
So we can't make that the road a part of the MDA then?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I have one other concern. On 17B, it's on page 7 of our in the MDA. It talks about notwithstanding the provisions of subsection 17A, a transfer by a developer of a lot or condominium dwelling located on the property within a city approved and so forth, so on. We don't allow condominium dwellings in industrial. And if I were to come in 20 years from now and see that, I'd say, well, if it says I can transfer it, I guess it must mean I can build it. So could we take that out?
Yeah, I mean, that we'd have, I don't see a problem with that. I suppose in the future you could change the industrial zone, allow condos in the industrial zone. So really this doesn't give them the rights to use it, but I see your point that it may create the impression that they have the right to put condos in there. But the subject matter of this is strictly successors and assigns, not permitted in conditional uses. I think it's okay either way, but if you're concerned about that, certainly make that recommendation to the council.
I would like to make that recommendation with the concurrence of the rest of the Planning Commission. And let's see. That's it.
Okay, so Commissioner Cunningham, you discussed several potential conditions that I think we already have addressed within the city code. And I think the only one that was outstanding was the one that you suggested, Commissioner Steele, which was to remove the condo in industrial comment that was in section 17A.
I think we just need to strike condominium dwelling unit, and it could, the lot can still be there. Just strike.
Which section was it? 17?
17B.
Or we could just say
Yeah.
lot or unit.
Yeah, that could be, because you could build industrial units on there.
Okay.
And it would leave it open-ended if you ever want to, not saying you would, but if you ever want to allow condos in the industrial zone.
Well, you could do a condo industrial. So.
True. You're just concerned about the dwelling. So we could just say lot or unit and it would cover
Okay.
that.
So
There's
Kimber,
two
you've
other-
captured that.
There's two other references to dwelling on line 4 and line 5.
True, so. And I just did a search. That's the only
We're fine with that
paragraph
change.
that mentions dwelling. So there's three references in that 7B.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cahoon. Okay, I think we've discussed this very well. I'll entertain a motion.
So just a reminder, these are two items, so we're looking for two motions. One is on the rezone and one is on the MDA. The additional conditions were added to the MDA.
I move to forward a positive recommendation for approval of HADCO rezone of approximately 40.99 acres from agricultural to industrial, with the findings and conditions in the staff report dated September 8th, 2016. I also move to forward a positive recommendation to the City Council for the HADCO MDA in generally the form outlined in Exhibit 2, and including necessary changes with the findings and conditions in the staff report dated September 8th, 2016 below, with the addition of item 4A and 4B.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
We have a second. Do we have a question on the motion?
Couple questions.
Yes.
So just to clarify, it's September 22nd, not September 9th.
September 22nd?
Or September 8th. And then also, I didn't hear, maybe I missed it in the motion about in paragraph 17B to delete the dwelling. Oh,
Those
Kimber's
are
got it up
4A
there.
and 4B.
Okay, never mind.
Do you agree with those?
I agree with that change from the 8th to the 22nd.
Me too.
Commissioner Kilgore, the second. Okay. Any other questions on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Cahoon, for coming.
Thank you, commissioners.
And thank you, public, for being patient. I think I know why you're here. All right, shall we, do we want to take a small break or do we want to go on?
Thank you so much.
If we could take at least a minute break, I'm trying to do the report of action.
If there's more to the balloons. There's pie in the hall here. If you'd like to get some pie, it's from my birthday. Get it while it lasts. There were only 4 pies.
Gordon?
We'll be back in
You'll
5
have the
minutes.
same problem I have. It doesn't print out all the stuff to this side.
The wind took out the power.
And that's where I was having the problem. And I
I usually have
copied
some
and
time to
pasted,
spend
I
with my
squeezed it, I
did not
changed
have time.
fonts, I did everything, and I never could get it. And I can't get it up on that email up on my computer. Okay.
You're almost there. Don't force it.
No, yeah.